this point in our game, we're going to want to have a character, a player, that basically animates. So first I'm going to create a player that can basically be idle, can go from an idle to a walking state, and then that can also sit. I'm first going to just create a folder to put my player in. Here I have my player folder. Perfect. So now I need to get some animations and skeletons and all this. I can go to Mixamo. This is a great source for skinned meshes and animations. I'm going to use this character. As I mentioned, I'm going to first get the idle animation. I'm going to download that. First, I'm going to download it with skin, meaning it's going to also download its mesh and its skeleton as well as the animation. I can upload it. Okay, so now finally I have my converted idle.fbx. I can go into it. Inside it, I can see that there's different animation assets that were converted, like the skeleton, the animation graph, the animation set, and the animations. So here I have my idle animation, and tick001 is a T-pose animation that a lot of Mixamo files come with. So first I can open my scene that got converted and see what it looks like. So yes, perfect. I have my character that's basically idle. Here in my scene graph, I see that I have a root entity that has an animation controller. This animation controller is referring the different animation assets that we saw earlier. So this is the animation graph, this is the animation set. We'll see that a bit later. And I can see that I have here first the skeleton hierarchy. And in here just all the skin meshes. Like the sneakers. Okay, so perfect. So now I have my idle animation, but I would also like to have a sitting and a walking animation. Oh, and before that, I can quickly show you if you ever want to visualize the skeleton that's with its bones that are being animated, you can do that by toggling draw skeletons. Perfect. Okay, so now I'm gonna go fetch my my walking and my sitting animation. I'm gonna make sure that it's in place so that the root of the animation doesn't actually move, and I'm going to download it. So I'm gonna download it without skin because now I just want the animation, and I'll be able to associate that animation to the skeleton that was already converted. And I'm also going to get sitting. Now I can upload my files. Walking is sitting. And now I can actually associate them to the skeleton that was already converted. So the skeleton that was already converted is called a Mixamo 6 hips. I'm just gonna upload. What I can do in the meantime is move these outside of this idle.fbx folder, and I'm just gonna move them out to the player folder. They'll just be easier to work with. Same as the scene idle. Okay. What I can also do is rename these assets. So I'm just going to do that quickly. Perfect. And so now we see that my sitting idle and my walking have both been converted, and there was only one animation converted, and this is already associated to our skeleton, so it will work fine alongside the idle. So I moved it into the player folder. Same with sitting idle. It'll just be easier to work with, like I mentioned. I'm going to delete that and delete this one as well. Okay, perfect. First of all, how am I going to actually incorporate my walking and my sitting idle into what I already have in the scene? I can do that through the animation graph. If you double click on it, you'll get the animation graph editor. The animation graph is where basically you're going to organize the logic of your animations. For example, if you want to go from a sitting state to an idle state, all of this is done here. This animation graph is the one that was converted for you, that was created for you by default. So here it has a root state machine, which is connected to the output pose. So whatever comes out of here is the final output of the animation graph. If I click on it, see here I have two states. I have my idle state and my take 001 state. And both of these states are just simple, they just simply sample the animation, the idle and this take 001, which is the T-pose. Basically this take 001, I don't really need it. I'm just going to delete it. And I'm also going to delete these inputs, and we'll see that a bit later. Now I have my idle state. I want to first incorporate my sitting state and maybe go from sitting to idle. I have to create a state, so sitting. I want to transition from sitting to idle. Here, this transition by default is just going to wait until the sitting state was played once, and then it will go to idle, which is fine for now. So within sitting, I just want to sample the animation. So I have an animation sample node, and I'm going to connect that to the output pose. Now I have this node, which is basically the container for whatever animation you want to put into it. So here the animation I can see here and here, in fact. And I need to basically drag the animation I want from the console to here. Just going to do that. And I'm going to drag my sitting, maybe either here or here. Publish. Publish is basically saving it. The last thing to note is this red outline, which is around the idle state. This means that this state is going to be the entry point of this animation graph. If we kept it like this, it would just stay in idle and loop in idle and basically never do anything else because there are no transitions from idle to any other state. So we want to make sitting the entry point, and the way we do that is as so. One last thing, we want to make sure sitting isn't just looping forever. That is here. So here, if I just had sitting looping forever, I would never see it transition. I want it to not loop. And then once it's finished playing, it will go to idle. So here, now if I open my idle scene, I should see my character be sitting. Yes, and after a while, yep, she goes to idle animation. Perfect. The next thing that we can do is incorporate the walking animation. To incorporate this walking animation, we have to think of basically what we want. Ideally, what would be nice is that we are able to blend from the idle animation to the walking animation with a variable that is then perhaps accessible by some other script, like a character controller script. And the other thing is that we really do want to blend from idle to walking, and eventually we could even imagine having a running animation that blends, that could also blend to run. So actually, I'm just going to create a new state, and I'm going to call it motion. So this is just going to handle motion in general. Here, I'm just going to put back the transition. And here, I'm going to create a blend space. So this blend space 1D will allow us to basically blend from our idle to walking with basically one variable. I'm going to call this motion. Perfect. And I'm going to already connect its output. So you see that when I clicked on it, it opened the blend space editor. Here we see it's really just along one axis. It goes from 0 to 1, so depending on what variable will connect here and what the value of that variable is, it will blend from whatever animations, sorry about that. It will blend from whatever animations we put on this axis. To basically put an animation, you have to right click, and I'm going to call first going to call this one idle. As you can see, we now have a new entry on the animation set. And I'm going to put this at 0. Now I'm going to have my walk animation as well. And I'm going to move this to 1. Perfect. And now what is left for me to do is to actually put the animations I want, link the animations I want to those 2 control points. So the last thing that's missing is this actual input variable. What we're going to do is go into our input editor. As you can see, it's called Animation Controller Input Editor. So if you remember well, the animation controller was a component on that root entity in the scene. And within that animation controller, all the inputs that we put here are going to be visible and will be configurable within the component itself. Okay, so I'm going to want to put a variable here. So I'm going to call it speed, because that makes sense, right? Okay, so it has to be a float. Now I've created my speed variable. I'm just going to drag it here, and I'm going to connect it. And if you look again here, you can see speed. So speed by default is going to be 0. And now I'm just going to publish it. Perfect. If I go back to my scene, and hopefully everything works, we're going to be sitting, as that's the entry point, and we get to idle. Okay. And we can see in the animation controller component that our speed has magically showed up. So now if I basically go from, make it go from 0 to 1, we'll see a slow blend. 1 is going to be fully walking. And one last thing that might be useful is to configure this transition from sitting to motion. It'd be nice to be able to configure this with inputs as well. Here what I can do is add here an input, for example, is moving. And I'm going to make it a Boolean. Here, if I go to simple condition, I can see that the transition condition, now I can basically here what will come up is whatever bool inputs you have. This will go from here to here if is moving is true. So that makes total sense. Now I'm going to do the opposite for motion to sitting. So is moving is false. If I publish that, I'm going to make this the entry point. I think that makes more sense. If I go back here, okay, so we have motion, and by default the bool is false, and make it by default true. Perfect. So now we see that is moving is true. If I do that, it's going to sit. If I do this again, it's going to move. Okay, perfect. So there you go. That's it. The other things you could do is basically add a running animation within your blend space 1D. You could also maybe have a transitional state between sitting to motion. For example, in Mixamo, there's a sit to stand, which you could place here in another state. So these are all tweaks you can do. But there we go.